Hey guys, I'm going to be recording a new video for you here today. This is how to write an offer. And we've got an updated contract recently, so I wanted to go through real quick with you on how to fill that out. So right here, we're going to log into Transaction Desk. If you can see where my mouse is going, it's on the lower right hand of your MLS Stellar login. Those apps are on the bottom right. And then we're going to go into Transaction Desk here. If you're not familiar with Transaction Desk, it's a very user-friendly platform, and it'll make writing offers very simple, and we store all our files here, which is great. A lot of firms have multiple different places for storing files, and I just don't see the need in that. The Transaction Desk does a great job. So you're going to start with naming the transaction, and I almost always simply keep it the address of the property. And so here I'm just going to do 123 Main Street, and I'm going to call it a test, just so everybody knows what's going on. There's a variety of different templates that you can use, and for our purposes today, we're going to just be doing a residential sale, and I'm going to add with tasks in there just so you can see what's going on. But again, condos, commercial, there's a variety of different checklists and templates to work with. We're going to start with residential sale with tasks, and then I'm going to import data from, you're going to use Stellar MLS. Okay, this will pull this data in, or you can use Realist. For today, we're just going to do Stellar. I'm going to skip the MLS number. If you know the MLS number and you're in Stellar here, you can literally copy and paste. So, for example, if I wanted to, I'm just going to take one of our listings here at Trend. Go in the MLS. You're going to click on what's active, and then I'm going to find out listing office name. I'm going to do Trend Realty. For some reason that didn't pop anything up. Try this cross property all. Let me grab, something's probably pending. There we go. Okay, so all of our listings are currently pending. And I'm going to grab, this is the market. The quick commentary on the market. If you have listings, they're going to go pending immediately. So we have a handful of listings right now. I'm going to hop into one of those. I'm going to pull up this property right here, Whisperlow. And this particular transaction is pending. As you see, it sold in just a handful of days. And I'm going to take this MLS number, copy and paste it. That's how you would do it, basically, on this transaction, okay? So click Create. And everything will kind of auto-populate in through Transaction Desk. So now you'll be able to, just with step-by-step going through an offer, very simple process. Waiting for this to load real quick. The Transaction Desk is moving a little bit slower because I'm going to see I am screen recording my screen here, and so it slows everything down. Normally Transaction Desk is very fast. So what happens here is there's an auto-populate wizard that basically you have a handful of steps, and I won't bore you with all of the details, but basically things populate in from the MLS. So much of the data will be input for you. I'm just going to click Next through this. You can spend some time in going over it with some of the details. I'm just going to click Next. These are all the context in the file. And finally, I'm going to go to Save and Exit, Done, and here we go. From here, I'm going to go over here to Forms. I'm literally going to click on this area right here, if you see my mouse on the right side, Forms, and this is where you can get literally any form by anything written by the Board of Realtors. So I'm going to click on Add, and now this is basically, I get a lot of questions. Where do I find this form? Where do I find that form? It is all in Forms. Literally anything you need. There's a variety of different forms, okay? So today we're just going to do an as-is contract. So I'm just going to go as is. I'm going to click Add. Sorry. I'm going to go as is, and then I'm going to add the as-is contract. Okay. So now I put as is in my search, and you'll see a bunch of different things here. There's as is right to inspect addendum. There is as is contract for sale and purchase. This is what I really want to use. Lots of the contracts you're going to be writing offers for will be on this form right here. So I'm going to select that and click Add. From here, I'm literally going to click on the contract, and we are rocking and rolling. Now, I'm always a little puzzled when people ask, what to fill in on the contract. I would just strongly recommend reading through the contract one time. I know that sounds a little bit absurd, but reading through the contract at least just once on your own and just really kind of understand what's going on. I'm not going to belabor you guys with the video of doing that here today, but spend an hour and just read through this contract, read every little word on the contract, and then just realize this is a fill in the blank form. So all we have to do is start entering data. A lot of the data has been pulled in, but if you have a buyer, obviously you'll enter their information here, and it's just literally line by line. If there's anything like personal property going to be sold with the property, you'd note that here. A lot of times, again, a lot of things will convey, not necessarily everything. I do not recommend getting into negotiating furniture. If you're selling furniture with the property, a lot of times that is something that you'll have to have a bill of sale, and the seller will have to pay sales tax and all that, buyer will have to pay sales tax and all that. It's another negotiation point that I would just leave it out. I would recommend your people to, negotiate, go buy their own furniture or negotiate somewhere else other than this contract to buy furniture, because it just can really screw up a deal. You can have a nice $1 million sale going and get hung up on the price of a couch, and it can really screw you up. Anything that's excluded, line 24, you're going to note anything excluded. So let's say that there was an item in the property, say that there was a condo being sold, furnished, and they wanted to keep a lamp or a light fixture. You could note that here. Purchase price, obviously you'll note the purchase price here. Initial escrow deposit. Here, basically, a lot of times you'll see 1 to 2% of the value. So if it's $1 million, you'd have 10 to 20,000. Again, negotiable, doesn't have to be any one particular amount. It can literally be zero. And I see a lot of land contracts convey where there just isn't escrow. Escrow can be zero, it could be $1, it could be a penny, it could be $1 million. It's a negotiable point. A lot of people forget to check line 30 here if the escrow is accompanied with the offer or will be made later. More often than not, you'll click 30II or 32 here because this will be sent later. A lot of times I use GIT title. Ariana works with GIT. GIT does a great job. We use them quite a bit. You're free to use whoever you'd like, but I feel like they're a great size for us and they do a really good job. Additional deposits. I don't particularly like getting into 2 sets of escrow checks. All additional deposit means is, typically you'll have one sort of escrow amount, and then after the inspection or an effective date, there can be an additional amount of money to kind of marry the buyer and seller together. But I don't like 2 sets of escrow payments because it's more tracking down paperwork, and I just think it's kind of unnecessary. Line 39, you're going to put the financing. Okay, so if I'm going to say let's say this is $1 million, and I was going to bring a loan in, I would say, let's say I'm going to get a 60% loan. See what happened there? It auto-populated that basically the borrower is going to bring in 60% from a loan, and the balance, which is $400,000, is on line 41, 42 here. Time of acceptance. A lot of times you'll see people negotiating how soon they want to have the offer accepted. For our purposes here today, I usually try to keep this pretty tight. You don't want to have a seller having tons of time to contemplate offers, so I usually try to keep that within a day, maybe even same day in the current market. Closing date, cash transactions can close pretty quick, probably a couple of weeks. You'll need to talk to the title company about that. But typically with closing dates, I like to use it if it's a loan 40 days in this market. These lenders and title companies are really backed up. So if you put people under the gun and only give them 30 days, it can be very precarious. So I typically, when I'm doing a loan, 40 to even 45 days. Another quick note on a closing date. I do not like closing at the end of the month. I do not like closing on Fridays. If you can, try to set these up where they're closing middle of the month where everything is not so hectic with the title companies. If a property is an investment property and there's a lease in place, you want to designate 6B here, line 72. Check if property is subject to lease or occupancy after closing. Assignability. Many times you'll have investors down here in Florida, and what you're going to want to do is click check may assign but not be released from contract. So let's say John Smith is under contract to buy a condo, and he decides, oh, I'm going to put it in my LLC. 84, this middle box here, may assign but not be released. That's what you want to do in case an investor or a buyer wants to use an LLC or a trust or something like that. If you ever see on the other side of this, may assign and thereby be released. This is a very tricky little box. If you check this box, you got a really wishy-washy contract there. Somebody could assign this contract to another buyer and then just be let go. So I would be very leery of allowing somebody to assign a contract and then just walk away. Financing many times down in Florida, you're going to see a lot of cash transactions. There's no doubt about it. You just simply designate 8A, line 88, you check this box. If, however, they're using financing, you go ahead and fill this following information out. Again, you want to know, you want to talk to the lender involved in the transaction. You want to know, is it a conventional offer, FHA, VA, and you'll check the according boxes. Again, read through this portion, guys. You want to make sure that you understand what's going on here. Be diligent. Just take the time and read through, have the conversation with the lender, and I think you're going to have a great transaction if you and the lender are on the same page for your client, your buyer. 132, 133, this is going to be pretty rare. Assuming an existing mortgage or doing a seller financing or purchase money note or mortgage to the seller, very rare. You know, you're probably not going to see a lot of this. This was something that was much more popular in previous decades, really. I don't see a lot of these type of transactions. I don't think we had a single one of them last year. Very important, next section, if you're trying to get the seller to pay something, let's say you want a $5,000 credit at close for closing costs, you'd note that here. Buyer to credit, $5,000. What you're going to want to do is on line 152, Trend and most of the companies here in Florida have a brokerage fee, and that's where you're going to disclose this. We want to just go above and beyond, making sure our clients know that we charge this fee. A lot of companies try to hide it and sneak it in at the end. That's just not my style. We want to disclose everything. It's on our addendum, and it's also something that we recommend just putting on the contract here. I've talked to a couple of different attorneys. Some say put it here, some say don't. I think the more cautious and the thing with more integrity is just to disclose these fees. So that's something that we charge, and that's something I recommend putting in. On to the next section. So who is going to pay for title? So many times title insurance is paid by one party. Now there's closing costs on both sides of any transactions. Seller and buyer will pay closing costs. However, the title insurance policy is something that's very negotiable, meaning buyer or seller can pay. Now there are, let's call it customary ways of doing business. One market, for example, the seller typically selects and pays. On the other hand, in Sarasota County, many times buyer picks and pays. I like, for my side of the transaction, to be able to designate the title company because I like working with title companies that I have experience with, that know me and my staff, and I like to be able to have context that I know they're diligent. Many times, if we allow the other side to select the title company, you don't know who you're working with, some out-of-state people. I've seen closings get screwed up. So while my buyer is going to be paying for the policy, we have a little bit more control, and then that way we know they're getting serviced properly, and there's nothing gimmicky or goofy going on. The biggest thing we don't want to do is lose our clients' escrow money or screw them up in a transaction. So while my buyer is paying for it, they get to select, and then we're with a company that we really like, who does a great job. And again, there's a variety of different title companies we work with. You're more than welcome to choose anyone you want, as well as the buyer. They can designate whoever they'd like to work with. Survey, here basically we're noting if there's any home warranty. Surveys are typically 5 days prior to closing day. The buyer, at the buyer's expense, can get a survey. It's a good thing to get. I typically recommend people to do it. Home warranty, I don't see a lot of home warranty. Sellers can get a home warranty. The buyers can pay for it. The seller can pay for it. It's really up in the air. But I don't see a lot of them. Typically, it's about $500, I think, in this market. On to the special assessment. So again, read this section very carefully. A lot of times condo buildings will be doing major renovations to the building, and there might be a special assessment or installment payments due. You want to make sure, especially with condos, that you know what's going on, and you can designate either A or B. Seller shall pay installments, seller shall pay in full. I like B just for safety. Seller shall pay in full prior to or at the time of the closing any assessments. I really like FB. Next section, again, I'm not going to read every single section. I do strongly encourage you to become familiar with this contract and read it over. It's going to be a great thing for you to know. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to call. There's also a legal hotline that we as realtors get access to. I highly recommend having them on, not speed dial, but on a regular. If you have legal questions, I'm certainly here on the brokerage level, but I'm not an attorney, so I can't advise to certain levels legal advice. But I can give you broker and investment business advice. I can't give you legal advice. So on to the next section. The next handful of pages in the contract, there's not much to fill out. We've basically done the heavy lifting here. On line 261, the inspection date. I will note in this market, not many sellers want to give you 15 days to do an inspection. I'm seeing a lot of 5 or 7 days to get an inspection done. Now that might be difficult, but the shorter the window you have for an inspection period, the better your odds are for getting your client to win the offer. Just think from the seller's perspective. You have 2 offers, say all the other terms and conditions are the same. One buyer needs to, inspect the property and wants 10 days. One buyer will do it in 4 or 5 days. These as-is contracts, I want to touch on one thing with regard to inspection. I hear so many times this incorrect adage that realtors in town say, well, the contract's as is. Correct. It is an as-is contract, but as you see right here, with right to inspect and cancel. So the as-is contract provides a get-out-of-jail-free card for buyers. If they do an inspection and there's some issues, they can cancel for any reason. They could state that the carpet is too long. It doesn't matter the reason. They have a right to cancel. So while it is as is, it is 99% of your questions answered. I'm sorry. The questions I get asked get answered. I won't go into too much further detail other than the data entry here for the balance of the contract. Anything under Section 19, 589, if you have condos that you're transacting on, you're going to need a condo writer. If the home is in a homeowners association, you'll need that. You're probably not going to see a lot of seller financing. You're probably not going to see a lot of mortgage assumption. You will see some FHA, VA. If your buyer is using an FHA or VA loan, you want to note that. There'll be an addendum. You can use an appraisal contingency. In this market, there's a lot of escalation clauses that people are using. I can touch on that, more in person or over the phone. But an appraisal contingency is something you might want to designate. And again, just item by item, if the house was built before 1978, you're going to need a lead-based paint. Pre or post occupancy, do people want to stay after the fact? Do they want to move in before? I really don't like T&U. I think a lot of times it can get very hairy with buyers and sellers. However, there are instances where you might need to get occupancy before or after closing, but it is a precarious situation and it can cause a lot of issues. In this market, you're not going to see a lot of sale of the buyer's property, but back in the day, many people would have to sell their property before they could buy another. In this market, the demand is just so high that most sellers will not accept a home sale contingency, which is B, sale of the buyer's property. You might be in a bidding war and be the backup contract. You need an addendum there. A kick-out clause is basically if you have a home sale contingency and there's some sort of escalation in the terms that you need to get rid of a transaction. Pretty complicated. I won't go too far into that. I highly recommend not using or accepting contracts that have home sale contingencies. The kick-out clause addresses that. People can waive their home sale contingency with a kick-out clause. Again, very nuanced. If you come across that situation, please give me a call. If you or somebody you know is selling a property and they have a license, you want to designate licensed personal interest. You always want to have disclosure of the fact that you're licensed. And again, that's basically the high points of the contract. If there's anything you have questions about, please don't hesitate to give me a call anytime. I love working with new agents. I love working with agents and getting them as much help as we can. But those are the quick and essential